The mess hall at Forward Operating Base Viper smelled like diesel and reheated lasagna, the kind of place where men laughed too loud and forgot the names of the people who fed them. Lieutenant Kara Matchstick Valdez stood behind the serving line with a metal spoon in her hand, her flight suit sleeves rolled to her elbows, her face blank as stone. She ladled chili onto trays without making eye contact. The SEALs barely noticed her. To them, she was furniture, a placeholder. The woman who scooped food and kept her mouth shut. What they didn't know, what nobody asked, was that she'd flown 87 combat missions over Kandahar before a rotor failure, and a bad landing shattered her left knee and grounded her for 6 months. What they didn't know was that she'd requested this assignment herself, desperate to stay near the flight line, even if it meant wearing an apron instead of a helmet. What they didn't know was that she still woke at 0300 every morning, her hands twitching toward controls that weren't there. The SEALs called her Cookie. Not cruelly but not kindly either, just another nickname for another forgotten face. She never corrected them. She just served the food, cleaned the trays, and listened. She listened to everything. The pilots who came through spoke in shorthand, grid coordinates, weather windows, exfil routes. She absorbed it all like a sponge soaking up blood. Her knee ached. Her hands itched. And every night, she stood outside the hangar and watched the Apache lift off into the black Afghan sky, their rotors cutting the air like knives through silk. Then came the day the shot rang out. It was 09:15 on a Tuesday, the kind of morning that felt too quiet, too still. The FOB was running a supply convoy to a village near the Pakistani border, standard logistics, nothing unusual. Kara was wiping down counters when the radio crackled. Not the mess hall radio, the one mounted near the operations tent 50 meters away, but the door was open, and she heard it. A voice strained and crackling through static. Viper Actual, this is Reaper 2-1. We are taking effective fire, grid November Delta 7426. Immediate CAS requested, over. Close air support. They needed guns. Now. She froze, spoon still in her hand, chili dripping onto the counter. She heard boots pounding across the gravel, heard shouting, heard the operations officer yelling into his handset, his voice tight with panic. Viper Actual to all aircraft, we need fast movers now, Reaper 2-1 is pinned down. And then the words that stopped her heart. Negative, Viper Actual, all Apache and Viper flights are wheels up on secondary ops. Earliest response time 45 mics, over. 45 minutes. The SEALs would be dead in 10. Kara dropped the spoon. She didn't run. She walked. Fast, controlled, her bad knee screaming with every step. She crossed the compound toward the hangar, her heart hammering against her ribs. There was one aircraft left. A single AH-64D Apache, tail number 663, sitting alone on the tarmac like a forgotten prayer. It was supposed to be down for maintenance. Hydraulic system check, not flight ready, tagged with red tape across the canopy. But Kara had watched the ground crew finish the work that morning. She'd seen them sign off the logbook, she knew. The crew chief was smoking a cigarette near the fuel depot, his back turned. Kara slipped past him, moving through the shadows like smoke. She reached the Apache and ran her hand along its fuselage, feeling the rivets under her palm, the cold metal still warm from the sun. She looked up at the cockpit. The keys weren't in it, they never were, but she didn't need keys. She needed a battery cart and 30 seconds. She found the cart behind the hangar, rolled it over, plugged it in. The Apache systems hummed to life, a low electric whine that sang through her bones. She climbed into the front seat, the pilot's seat, and her hands moved on instinct, flipping switches, priming fuel, spooling the engines. The Garrett turboshafts coughed once, twice, then roared. The rotors began to turn, slow at first, then faster, the blades cutting arcs through the air, throwing dust in every direction. Someone shouted. She ignored them. She keyed the radio. Viper Actual, this is Matchstick, I'm wheels up in 663, moving to support Reaper 2-1, over. Silence. Then, Matchstick, you are not cleared for flight, return to. She didn't wait for the rest. She pulled collective, twisted throttle, and the Apache leapt into the sky like a falcon released from a cage. The fob shrank beneath her. The mountains rose ahead, jagged and brown, their peaks cutting into the pale morning sky. She pushed the cyclic forward, nose down, accelerating. The turbines screamed. The airframe shuddered. She felt every rivet, every wire, every ounce of thrust. She was flying again, and it felt like breathing after drowning. The grid coordinates burned in her mind. November Delta 7426. She didn't need to check the map. She knew that valley. She'd flown it a dozen times before the crash. The terrain was brutal, narrow canyon walls, no room for error, thermals rising off the rocks that could flip a helicopter like a coin. But she also knew the approaches, the angles, the places where an Apache could hide, low and fast, until the enemy never saw it coming. She flew at treetop level, hugging the terrain, her eyes scanning the horizon. The radio crackled again. Reaper 2-1, this is Viper Actual, CAS inbound, hold your position, over. And then quieter, a different voice. Who the hell is Matchstick? She didn't answer, she just flew. The valley opened ahead of her, a scar carved into the earth, dust rising in plumes from where the convoy had stopped. She saw the Humvees first, 3 of them pulled into a defensive circle. Then the muzzle flashes. Small arms fire, stitching across the rocks, kicking up dirt around the vehicles. She saw figures moving on the ridgeline, 8, maybe 10 armed men with AKs and RPGs firing down into the kill zone. The SEALs were pinned, outgunned, running out of time. Kara didn't hesitate. She nosed the Apache down, diving into the canyon, her thumb hovering over the weapon selector. She toggled to rockets, locked the TADS, Target Acquisition and Designation System, onto the ridgeline. The crosshairs steadied. She squeezed the trigger. The Apache bucked as a pair of Hydra rockets streaked away, white smoke trails spiraling through the air. They impacted with a double crack, orange fireballs blooming against the rocks, throwing dirt and bodies into the air. The enemy scattered. She banked hard left, cyclic pulled tight, pedals dancing, bringing the nose around. She toggled to the 30mm chain gun. The TADS locked onto a figure scrambling for cover. She fired. The cannon roared, a sound like thunder compressed into a fist. The rounds tore through stone and flesh, each one a hammer blow. She walked the fire across the ridgeline, methodical, relentless. Another figure fell, then another. The radio exploded. Who the hell? Reaper 2-1 to unknown Apache. You are danger close. Say again, danger close. She keyed the mic. Reaper 2-1, Matchstick, keep your heads down, I'm making another pass. She pulled the Apache into a tight orbit, circling the convoy like a hawk over prey. Her eyes tracked movement. Her hands worked the controls without thought. She fired again, rockets, cannon. The ridgeline erupted in smoke and fire. The enemy broke. She saw them running, shadows fleeing into the rocks, and she followed, her finger on the trigger, her jaw set. She gave them no mercy. She gave them no quarter. She gave them what they deserved. When the last target stopped moving, she pulled up, climbing out of the canyon, the Apache's engines straining against the thin mountain air. Below, the SEALs were already moving, loading wounded into the Humvees, engines roaring to life. The convoy punched through the ambush site and disappeared down the valley road, dust trailing behind them like a comet's tail. Kara circled once more, scanning for threats. Nothing. The valley was silent. She keyed the radio. Reaper 2-1, Matchstick, you're clear, say status, over. A pause, then a voice rough and shaken. Matchstick, we're 5 by 5. No KIA, Jesus Christ, who are you? She didn't answer. She just turned the Apache south and flew back toward the fob, the sun climbing higher, the sky turning from gray to gold. Her knee throbbed. Her hands were steady. And for the first time in 6 months, she felt whole. When she landed, the entire base was waiting. The operations officer, the ground crew, the commander, and the SEALs, all of them standing in a loose semicircle around the Apache, their faces a mix of shock, confusion, and something else. Something that looked like respect. Kara shut down the engines, pulled off her helmet, and climbed out of the cockpit, favoring her bad knee. She didn't look at them. She just walked toward the hangar, her flight suit streaked with sweat and dust. The SEAL team leader stepped forward. He was tall, bearded, his face sunburned and hard. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. Then he spoke. Your Matchstick. It wasn't a question. She nodded. You saved my men. She shrugged. I was just flying. He shook his head slowly. No, you weren't just flying. He trailed off, glancing at his team, then back at her. We thought you were the cook. Kara met his gaze. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. I am the cook. I'm also a pilot. Turns out I can do both. Silence. Then one of the SEALs, a younger guy, barely 25, with a bandage on his arm, laughed, not mockery, relief. He stepped forward and held out his hand. Thank you. She shook it. His grip was firm, grateful. The others followed. One by one they shook her hand, their faces open, their eyes no longer sliding past her like she was invisible. The team leader was last. He held her hand a beat longer than the others. We owe you, he said simply. Kara shook her head. You don't owe me anything, just remember my name isn't Cookie. He smiled just a little. I'll remember. She turned and walked away, limping slightly, her knee screaming, her heart pounding. Behind her she heard them talking, their voices low and wondering. She didn't care. She'd done what needed doing. She'd flown, and that was enough. But it wasn't over, not by a long shot, because the commander was waiting for her inside the operations tent, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. When she stepped inside, he looked at her for a long time without speaking. Finally, he said, Lieutenant Valdez, you just stole a $20 million aircraft and engaged enemy combatants without authorization. You realize I could court-martial you for this. She stood at attention, her eyes forward. Yes, sir. You also saved the lives of 8 men who would have died if you hadn't acted. He paused. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to recommend you for a flight physical. If you pass, you're back on the roster. If you don't, we'll discuss your future. Clear. Her breath caught. She didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded. Dismissed. She saluted and turned to leave. As she reached the door, he called after her. Valdez. She stopped, looked back. Good flying today. She didn't smile, but something inside her chest, something that had been clenched tight for 6 months, finally loosened. Thank you, sir. 3 weeks later, she passed the flight physical. The doctors cleared her knee, cleared her head, cleared her record. She was reassigned to active flight status, back in the cockpit where she belonged. The SEALs requested her personally for their next op. When she walked into the briefing room, they stood, all of them. The team leader nodded at her, his face serious. Matchstick, glad you're here. She took her seat, glad to be here. The briefing began. Maps on the wall, enemy positions marked in red. The mission was simple: extract a downed pilot behind enemy lines, 40 clicks into hostile territory, narrow window, high risk. The kind of mission that got people killed. The kind of mission she lived for. She listened, her mind already calculating approaches, altitudes, contingencies. When the briefing ended, the team leader looked at her. Questions? She shook her head. No, sir, I'm ready. He smiled. I know you are. They flew at dusk. 2 Apache, her bird in the lead, the second flying cover. The sun was setting over the mountains, turning the sky the color of blood and fire. She pushed the cyclic forward, accelerating, the turbines roaring, the desert blurring beneath her. The radio was quiet, focused, professional. She felt the weight of the mission, the lives depending on her, and she welcomed it. This was what she was made for. They reached the LZ at 2100 hours. The downed pilot was hiding in a ravine, enemy patrols closing in. Kara came in fast and low, her rotor wash kicking up dust, her eyes scanning for threats. The SEALs fast-stroked down, hit the ground running, secured the pilot, and loaded him into the Apache's jump seat. 30 seconds. In and out. Clean. As they lifted off, small arms fire erupted from the tree line. Kara banked hard, returned fire with the chain gun, covering their escape. Tracers lit up the night. The other Apache joined in, hammering the enemy positions. They climbed into the darkness, the mountains falling away, the stars cold and bright above. When they landed back at base, the downed pilot, an Air Force captain, shaken but alive, climbed out and looked at Kara. Your matchstick. She nodded. He held out his hand. I heard about you. They said you were a legend. She shook his hand. They exaggerate. He laughed, "I don't think so." Word spread fast. Within a month, every pilot on the base knew her name. Within 2 months, every SEAL team requested her for Overwatch. She flew mission after mission, her reputation growing with each one. They stopped calling her Cookie, they called her Matchstick, and when they said it, it wasn't a joke. It was a title, earned, respected. She became the pilot you wanted when things went sideways, the one who flew into places no one else would, the one who brought people home. Her knee still ached. Her hands still remembered the crash, but none of that mattered anymore because she was flying, and she was damn good at it. Years later, after her deployment ended, after she rotated stateside, after she trained the next generation of pilots, someone asked her about that day, about the shot that rang out, about the SEALs who never forgot. She was older then, her hair streaked with gray, her knee held together with pins and determination. She thought about it for a long time. Then she said, "I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just trying to fly." But that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was simpler and harder. The truth was that she'd been grounded, forgotten, reduced to someone who served food instead of her country. And when the moment came, when the radio crackled and the SEALs were dying and no one else could help, she'd made a choice. She'd chosen to be who she really was, not the cook, not the injured pilot, not the woman they overlooked, but Matchstick, the one who lit the fire, the one who never let it go out. And the SEALs never forgot, because legends aren't born from perfect moments. They're born from imperfect people who refuse to stay down, from women who limp to the flight line with bad knees and broken pride and fly anyway, from the ones who hear the shot ring out and don't run away. They run toward it because someone has to, and sometimes that someone is the person no one expected, the one they called Cookie, the one they should have called by her real name all along, Matchstick. And when the sky turned dark and the enemy closed in and hope seemed lost, she was the light that never went out, the fire that saved them all. And that's a story worth remembering.